I could
really
have
hope
like
I can get to that point.
a quarter of a Reese's cup would just do it for me.
Oh, yeah. So for me, it's not sugar so much as it's soda and ice cream, like Blizzards
Ooh.
specifically. And that's probably one that I won't do away with. Really, I'll reserve it for if I've been a good boy all week, then I get a
You've been a good
Blizzard on
boy.
the weekend.
Yes.
Yeah,
You get a Blizzard on the weekend.
exactly.
Who's been a good boy? And
I
really,
have.
it's going to start to, it's going to be like you in your car, like alone, and just like, well, Thursday's really the start of the weekend.
Yeah, Amy, that's going to resonate with Amy because we started talking like, okay, Saturday's going to be our ice cream day. You know, every Saturday we're going to go get ourselves an ice cream, and we're like, okay, cool,
Ice cream
that's
day.
good.
Ice
And
cream
then
day.
and then very quickly it turned into, well, the weekend is our ice cream time. We get ice cream on the weekend, and
Right.
then the weekend very quickly began to include Friday evening. Obviously, Friday evening is when the weekend begins.
That's the weekend.
But then
Yeah.
sometimes, like if we didn't do the show, if I didn't do the show with Jason and we had Friday off, well, I might go do something in the afternoon on Friday. And then it's like, well, I'm already out. So I don't want to like go home and then have to drive all the way back to Dairy Queen when I'm already over here. So, I mean, it's
you
2
wanna be
o'clock. I might as
irresponsible?
well I'll just, the weekend starts at 2 today. And yeah, so, I mean, if I hadn't gotten sick, then who knows, ice cream day might have turned into Wednesday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
That's great.
Let's make sure all these streams are working. What's up, folks? We've got some
Hello.
viewers, so we must be doing
More
something
diet
right.
tips coming your way.
Oh yes. When we connected here today, Steven was just raving about something that was in his mouth. And
Yep.
and
Well, the paid subscribers will know what it was.
yeah. The paid subscribers get to know. You get to
Yeah.
find out what Steven puts in his mouth and raves about.
Hi, Mom.
Okay, so what we're going to do today, this title of this episode I put was "New Survey Shows Political Violence in America is Inevitable."
Can I try something new for the show? I haven't run it by you, but as the other host, okay. I'll have to get in character. New survey shows that political violence is inevitable. Yes, my friends. It seems that the path that many of us knew we were headed down is real. Oh, it's real. It's not just conspiracy. Your friends will see it on CNN in a couple of days. It will be plastered across major mainstream media. Sorry. I just want to see if it would work. Every time a Tim Pool notification comes up on my YouTube notifications or whatever, I think of Corey in the inner circle just posting. Tim Pool is honestly kind of an annoying hype machine. I just think it's the funniest. And I agree with it. And it's just like, oh, cool. So what's the names of like your guys' episodes? Oh, ours. Let's see. Aliens are real, and we have video proof. Jesus Christ is coming back tomorrow. Top 5 reasons that Nazis get a bad rap, because there's more than 5, obviously. And all libertarians are gay, and we have video of you doing gay stuff. We're going to show it. Why? What's up?
Oh, we need to start doing a Tim Pool segment because, oh man.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, I already want to end the episode right now and go take a nap because it's intense. It's hard. It's very hard. I have a headache. I'm busy right now after doing that.
Once upon a time, I was subscribed to Tim Pool, and I had to unsubscribe from him just because it was so exhausting to get his notifications.
Just reading them.
I'm like, oh my God, I need to take a nap. Just for like,
I can hear him reading them.
Yes, my blood pressure just spikes when I get a notification from Tim Pool and see, and it's
Yep.
he has mastered clickbait. He really has. He's done a very, very good job of it.
Yes.
But
all right, you can do the thing you were going to do.
Yeah,
I just wanted to do that. When I saw what you called the episode, I just started. I was walking around my house for like an hour doing that. Which is probably why I'm really tired.
Steven's going to fall asleep halfway through the episode today.
Real intro, go.
Okay. I'm trying to make sure that these different streams are all working right. Everything's looking good. And I have to make sure that they aren't all playing. Oh yeah, Mudwater.
Thank you for the sponsorship. Mudwater.com /whitemail. Promo code whitemail.
And you'll get 50%
And
off every single
right,
order you ever place
ownership.
with them. 5% ownership.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been going here for about 5 minutes. We usually try to BS a little bit and give some people some time to get in here, and that was quite a bit of BS. So I think we're good to start. Now, before I ask you guys to like and subscribe and all that, I needed to just give a shout out to Magoo, one of our loyalist listeners and commenters. Magoo is his screen name on YouTube where he usually comments, but it turns out that it's Jim McGill, who I'm friends with on Facebook. And I was like, oh, hey, I know you. So he commented on a post I made sharing the episode that I did with Buck over at Counterflow, which the episode dropped on Monday, and we've gotten a really, really good response from it. So it's good to hear that the stuff that we have to talk about actually resonates with you guys and that there's an audience for it. So go over to Counterflow and listen to the episode I did with Buck. It was called The Structures of Power and the Problems of Libertarianism. So I shared that on Facebook, and I just said I had a super fun conversation with Buck. Go listen. And then our buddy Magoo here, he commented, and he said, great episode, as expected. I've really enjoyed where both you and Buck have taken the conversation recently. I love being mentally challenged. Well, no. He said, I love being challenged mentally. And you have definitely accomplished that over the past few weeks and months. So I just wanted to say that I'm really glad to hear that our show is creating mentally challenged people. That was exactly our goal setting out, and it sounds like we've been a success. Yes, and starring some. Yeah, our show is a show for mentally challenged people by mentally challenged people. Anyways,
yes.
So shout out Magoo and his mental challenges. So do us a favor. You're watching King Pilled now. Do us a favor and subscribe wherever you're watching. If you're watching on Twitter, on Periscope, which will be around for another couple of weeks, then go ahead and follow me. I'm at Real King Pilled, and Steven is at Messina Inc. And then if you're watching on YouTube, or at some point in the future when we finally get this uploaded to iTunes, you're listening on a podcatcher of choice, then do us a favor and subscribe to the show, and then share the show. We're working on growing this deal here, and we're playing a game where we try to see whether which will happen first. Will we hit 1,000 subscribers, or will we get our channel removed from YouTube? So far, we haven't set up a backup anywhere.
Buck Johnson's, yeah, thanks for that appearance. We are stampeding towards 250,000 subscribers already.
We're almost there. Maybe if enough of you guys share this show while we're live today over the next hour and a half or 3.5 hours, however long we go, then we might be able to hit 250,000 subscribers. And I don't think that we're 1/4 of the way to getting our channel deleted. So I think we may be ahead of the game.
Could be. You know, I don't want to tease the loyal listeners, the liberty lovers, as we like to call them, but I just have tingles when I heard like a little bit of the details of what the response to the Buck Johnson appearance was, and I just think it portends so well for the future. In fact, that's why we were late, because we were talking about how great we're doing.
Yeah,
we had to share that with one another. But
we had to take the time to discuss with each other how proud we are of ourselves.
Mostly how proud we are of Matthew. But buckle up, fans. We're just getting started.
That's correct. You know, I just realized Buck Johnson, he should start incorporating buckle up as a phrase, because everybody loves a good dad joke.
You're welcome, Mr. Johnson.
There you go, Bucky boy.
We have
I don't know if he wants to be called Bucky boy.
You have buckle up, Bucky boy.
What's up, Carlos? All right. So,
real this time. Here we go.
We have there's a specific subject I wanted to talk about that I put in the title about that political violence is inevitable, and then I wanted to answer some comments that at least one guy in particular made a bunch of comments on one of our videos, and they were thoughtful, and I wanted to give them a thoughtful response. And then there may be some other
probably
ones that we'll
representative of what a lot of people who might stumble upon this would say.
Very much so. Yeah. It seems like the type of thing that it's a very common libertarian. Basically, he kind of repeated some common libertarian tropes, which were exactly the sort of thing that that Stephen and I ran into, that we kind of worked and thought our way through, mostly had our hands held by people who are smarter than us, and they helped us work through some of these issues, and then that was sort of what became the inspiration for the podcast that you're listening to now. So first, I realized that I forgot to do something before we started here. I forgot to set up the screen share so I can try and show these graphics. So let's see if we can do this on the fly.
It looks like you're doing it on the fly as we speak.
Can you see it?
Future audio listeners, just know that something is absolutely moving around the screen right now. And
yes.
Matthew is doing great.
And now I need to figure out how to make it. Yeah, I need to figure out how to make it bigger. Oh, there we go. I think I just made it bigger.
Don't we? Oh, bam. Look at that.
There we go. Okay, so I have no idea how we're going to get back to seeing us, but I'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
That's right.
So what you're looking at if you're watching live is, I mean, if you're watching live, you can actually tell yourself what you're looking at. If you're not watching live and you're just listening, what this is here is it's the results of a survey. And it's the survey was done in 2016, and then it was done again in 2020. And the groups who are surveyed, there is 7 of them, ranging from very liberal to very conservative. So very liberal, somewhat liberal, moderate, somewhat conservative, and very conservative. Now, I don't know these. I guess they must be self-identified. Whether someone is very liberal or somewhat liberal, I suppose they would just self-identify there. But the survey was done by American National Election Studies Time Series in 2016 and 2020. And the question in this particular graph is, how much do you feel it is justified for people to use violence to pursue their political goals in this country? And what's portrayed is the percent who responded not at all. And this is among the white respondents. So what you're dealing with here is white people who have self-identified as everything. White people who have self-identified as everything from very liberal to very conservative. And they were asked in 2016 how much they feel that it's justified for people to use violence to pursue their political goals in this country. And then they were asked the same question again in 2020. And we're seeing, and the difference between the two is pretty striking. So everything that is right of center, so somewhat conservative, and very conservative, more of them went from saying, how would you say this? More of them believe that it is. How much do you feel it is? There's a double negative in here that I'm getting hung up on. So how much do you feel it is justified for people to use violence? They went up. So from the somewhat conservatives in 2016, 87.7% of them said that they feel like it is not at all justified. There was the double negative. So fewer conservatives now believe that it is justified for people to use violence to pursue their political goals in this country, which does not at all comport with the mainstream media narrative about, or not the mainstream media, but the corporate press. I don't like calling them mainstream media because it makes them seem important. So contrary to the corporate press narrative, Trump supporters, or people who are inclined to be Trump supporters, have moved away from considering it justifiable to use violence to pursue your political goals in this country. They went from the somewhat conservatives, 87.7% of them said that it's not at all appropriate in 2016, and now 94.2% of them do. So a jump of almost 5%. And then the very conservative people, it's interesting here that the somewhat conservatives were more inclined before than they are now. The biggest jump in people moving away from political violence is among the somewhat conservatives. So prior to this, the somewhat conservatives were more inclined to say that it's appropriate to use political violence. The very interesting results are on the left side of the aisle. So, surprisingly. So the starting with the moderates, their number went down. So in other words, the number of people who said that it's not at all justified to use violence to pursue your political goals in this country went down from 2016 to 2020. So more people are saying that it is justifiable, or at least everything to the above not at all. But the most interesting result is the people who self-identify as very liberal. they went from in 2016, 86.9% of very liberal people said that it is not at all justified for people to use violence to pursue their political goals in this country. That number plummeted. Now only 66.5% of people of white people who self-identify as very liberal consider that it is appropriate to use violence to pursue your political goals in this country. That's an absolutely gigantic change. So, in other words, white, very liberal people now think it's much more appropriate to use violence in pursuit of your political goals. And if you think that that's going to change, that that's somehow going to reverse and go the other direction, I think that you're dreaming. This is a very significant change, and it portends some things that are very, very bad. So before I get to that, I wanted to show you this other one here as well. Make sure I can get the whole thing in the shot. Okay, so it says this other one was how much do you feel it is justified for people to use violence to pursue their political goals in this country? So it's the same question, and it's the percent of people not replying not at all. So it's kind of just another way to show basically the same data. So
it's on the menu in some capacity for these people.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so it's about a third of the very liberal people say that it's at least on the menu for them. That's a good way of framing it. So let me now figure out how to get this back to our prior view. Bear with me here for a sec, folks. There we go. I think that I did it. Look at that.
I think you did.
I am just something else to be proud of myself for.
Producer Matthew.
Yeah, that's right. I can produce this thing and
Pretty
talk.
Good.
So
it's very hard to do.
It is, yeah. You have to track multiple things in your brain at the same time while also not having dead air, and so it kind of winds up with you sometimes saying stupid things. But so be it.
Yes.
So
this is a good question here. Physical violence or political? When they asked the question, they said political violence.
It was. I think it just said violence.
Violence.
Yeah, it doesn't
straight up violence.
It doesn't specify some variant of violence, just violence.
So, okay, so and it's 2016 and 2020, not 2021, 2020. So 2016, that was like a harbinger, like Trump was very much was the entirety of the discussion.
Yeah.
When that question was being asked. And then 2020, anything violent happened in 2020? I can't remember. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I wonder if just what's fresh in people's consciousness, how people interpreted that question. There could be a couple interpretations.
Given that it was in 2020, it was not a question that was asked in the context of the thing at the Capitol. I'm thinking summertime, spring, summer. Yeah. So I wonder if it's interesting. I wonder if that's what, is in people's minds, if that's sort of what they're responding to. I wonder if a conservative is reading that question and thinking, no, this that I'm watching on the news is unacceptable. Or I'm wondering if they're thinking, we could get down. We would do something different, but and the same thing on the other side of the aisle. I wonder if they view it as sort of giving approval to the peaceful protests. yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That was what my thought was it's the peaceful protests. Right. That's what kind of rewired it for very liberal people. They watched. So the majority of people watched what just happened because I'm confident that very liberal people are actually a small minority in the country. The majority of people are not very liberal. There's just sampling issues given on like the people who are willing to get involved in politics and answer questions and et cetera. So they seem the country seems like it's far more liberal than it actually is. It's just that the people who are very liberal are the ones who are also the most inclined to get into politics and be very radical about their politics. So they have an outsized impact compared to their proportion. But what this means is that they watched everything that happened over the last year. They watched the destruction of often minority neighborhoods and the complete bankrupting of innocent shop owners. And they said, actually,
Cool.
that's not such a bad thing. That's good.
Yeah.
Their response, their takeaway was just completely different from the majority of. You could see the vast majority of people otherwise either stayed about the same or were like less inclined toward political violence. They said actually political violence is less appropriate. So this also shows that. So this not only does this demonstrate that the radicalizing of American liberals, it also demonstrates the pacifying of American conservatives. American conservatives, after watching people rampage through their streets and destroy their neighborhoods, now believe that political violence is less appropriate. So this is very much a dynamic of someone walked up to you and slapped you in your face, and now you believe even less in slapping people in the face. That's probably that's a very noble position to have, but it also makes it much more likely that you're going to get slapped in the face again. So for this reason, I think that these two ends of this graph show, as the title says, that political violence in America is inevitable and it's going to increase and it's going to get worse. And I want to make it very clear that I'm not advocating for that. I don't think anybody should be getting involved in political violence. But this tells me that I'm describing what I see as a trajectory. And and I see this trajectory going toward political violence getting much worse.
I wonder if on the conservative end of things is just that they're watching the news and they've just seen Portland for months, and they get asked that question, and like that's what's fresh in their mind. So they say, no, of course violence is not acceptable, as opposed to thinking that violence is acceptable, but we have to do our violence for a different end. So I wonder what the mental space of a conservative answering that question was in 2020.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that this poll isn't necessarily an indicator of how much less inclined toward actually committing violence conservatives are, because it's very possible for someone to say, well, it's not acceptable, but I'm going to have to do it anyways. That isn't precluded from this survey. I do think that's probably I think most people don't reason on do multi-level reasoning in that sense. They're more likely to just kind of keep thinking that it's not okay and keep thinking that it's not okay and keep thinking that it's not okay, and then just snap one day and just flip the switch the other way. So they're not going to hold both thoughts at the same time. That would be my guess with the majority of people, but the takeaway would be the same. Either way, liberal people definitely are more inclined to commit political violence. So if one side of the aisle is becoming more inclined to violence, and the other side of the aisle is the one that historically has a much larger aversion to violence, then the outcome here is very, very obvious. And I think that this should, for someone, so I'm guessing a lot of the people watching here probably are like, oh, I'm not a conservative or a liberal. I'm something different. This should be instructive to you as to what the climate is of the country around you and how that implies that you should act, and what you think is going to be effective in terms of mitigating or getting involved in this process somehow. This is why I said at the end of my conversation with Buck, he asked about the Mises Caucus and Dave Smith and all that, and obviously I have strong feelings about it. And and it just popped into my head as I was talking to him, and I said it, that if the Mises Caucus ever gets around to doing something significant or actually having a significant impact, then very quickly Mises Caucus will become synonymous with Proud Boys. They'll be the new Proud Boys. And they're going to pull out 100%. every last person who has gone on social media and posted Mises Caucus holding a gun or worn a Mises Caucus shirt or hat with a gun. They're going to pull out every last one of you, and they're going to ramp up the charge of domestic terrorism against the Mises Caucus. That's what you're lining up for.
Yeah, that's what in like, because I was reading the comments that that guy left, and basically what all libertarians have served to do is basically give cover for a lot of policies that are going to ultimately impact them negatively, while providing endless amounts of material for people to consider them, Nazis or whatever. And the example that came back to me was, I got like an argument about someone making an open borders case, and it was just the idea of, if ever you feel like the worst people in the world are agreeing with you or amplifying your voice in any way, you don't want to think twice about that, because ultimately with open borders, all they're doing is going to use whatever arguments that you have and say, even libertarians, will agree that it's time to whatever, and they're going to bring in a bunch of people into the country that they will cozy up to and immediately consider that convinced that you're a Nazi. And the podcast, like there's one guy like who always has like an AR behind him when he's doing like the video, and I just thought, in addition to just being kind of corny, it was just like you're handing it right to them. You know what I mean? Like no one is going to have a conversation long enough to for you to convince them, where you're coming from. It's going to be 2 seconds of these dweebs and flak jackets or whatever, and holding fucking grenades and shit, and just this whole just getting understandably kind of like getting spun up by a lot of like relatively charismatic arguments and people, and just holding this illusion that it's like, yeah, we're gonna fight against the state. This is very pre-2020 time, because like I really feel like a lot of things changed there. But yeah, like pre-2020, it seemed very kind of safe to be like, yeah, I'm kind of an anti-government guy. You'd say that like publicly, and like, yeah, there's pictures of me and guns, and it's like, oh man, yeah, I guess you're not a big fan of the government. But now where everything's ratcheted up to 11, all that stuff, it just is. It would take half of an article written by somebody to make Mises Caucus and Proud Boys in the same bucket. In the same, like, look at it. You don't really hear anything about Proud Boys. Unless it's, yeah, he's a Proud Boy, get him,
Yeah.
The same thing, you don't hear about they started calling them the CNN boys. You don't really hear too much about the CNN boys anymore. And a lot of those people were actually kind of like left, like culturally or socially, I would say, very very like vocal about LGBTQ issues and stuff like that. And so it was, just having, I don't think they in any way were what they got portrayed to be, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like
They don't control their own. They don't control their own framing. They don't get to dictate their framing when they step into that arena. You like, this is your intentions and your principles and all this stuff. It doesn't matter at all. Your public image is not defined by you. Your public image is going to be defined by people who would be plenty fine watching you be destroyed and your family taken away from you. Like that, people just have to realize that this is, your life can be very, very good if you focus on the right things. There's this thing. So like Carlos here. Carlos said that liberals and conservatives are violent via laws, and nerds in suits in the Capitol are fucking gangsters. They're more effective at violence without getting their hands dirty. Yeah, but like in a conversation like this, he has physical violence or just laws that are violent. Someone who's answering a question here doesn't consider laws violence, and I know all the arguments for why it is. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm saying that that's, to the vast majority of people, that's not violence. So if you've tuned your mind to the idea that, oh, this is violence and I'm suffering as a victim of violence, you're hardwiring your biology to be more likely to do something that's going to make your life significantly worse. Being like, getting taxed sucks, and it's also much better than being thrown in a boxcar. And what we're trending toward is the trigger finger of the people who load people into boxcars getting a lot more sensitive. And there's this idea that, oh, we can act all hard and be our radical, edgy selves. And it's just like it's just shocking to people, and ooh, it makes us kind of cool and whatever. But that's I think you have to think strategically. You have to think pragmatically about the situation that you're in, and what you intend doesn't mean anything. There are like hives of people that are roaming around society right now, digitally or literally, looking for an excuse to tarnish someone as a domestic terrorist and to frame them as a domestic terrorist. And they have powerful, wealthy people who are willing to bankroll them and amplify their message. If you position yourselves, if you give people a justification to paint you that way, they are more than happy to.
Member of Boogaloo Boys, in quotes, pleads guilty to conspiracy to provide material support to Hamas. Like, and so that's like,
Christ.
Yeah, man. And like, and I know I've met the kid. I've talked to the kid. I'd be pretty surprised.
The
like
one from the headline, you know him?
Yeah. He's 22.
What are the odds that he was contacted by a undercover federal agent who set him up and framed him as a
about 1,000%. And not for nothing, what do you think that the odds, so anyone watching this show and us and whatever, listening to this whenever, the odds that someone that we look up to or all kind of know being somehow in on that in some capacity, whether they're or working with or something like that, it is not zero. You know what I mean? It's definitely not zero. And it's almost impossible that the odds are zero, actually. So I just think, people need to be very careful. And so I kind of go that really, it rubbed me the wrong way when in March and April and into May and stuff like that of the last year, which Jesus, it's the same time now. So basically about a year ago, the sentiment was, something along the lines of like, man, I can't believe people are taking this lying down, which is a harmless enough statement, but it just really got me thinking, are you trying to get the plebs to do something? Because I'll tell you why I'm taking it lying down, like just from anyone else's perspective, is because, violating the laws to like run my very small business, I'm facing a class 2 misdemeanor. So I haven't heard particularly of any libertarian organization getting together and with, providing legal services, business owners willing to stand up or anything like that, which is actually some work that, people could get behind. But in just terms of just like, I can't believe people are taking it lying down. Well, what the fuck? What are you doing? And so that's really when I and I've been trying to figure this out, but it got me thinking. The material that people are putting out there, it's very dangerous to have it serve the purpose of just whipping people up and getting them emotional, because emotion's dumb. It can just be channeled like wherever. I think understanding what's happening around you, putting it in some kind of historical context, and then going from there is probably pretty smart, while focusing on yourself and getting yourself in the right place, because it is there's a long road ahead, and the transition, I think, into this guy in the comments, sort of giving some solutions, some libertarian solutions. You're libertarians who have sort of just kind of mastered like the basic introduction to libertarianism and have all the talking points. They're describing a beautiful island. Okay, let's call it Saipan, just for lack of a better island, right? But we're in Myrtle Beach. Okay, Myrtle Beach is fine. If I'm being very generous, Myrtle Beach is fine, right? And so you have a libertarian talking to on Myrtle Beach and saying, there's a really beautiful island just over there. It's called Saipan. You know, it's gorgeous. It's a paradise. We definitely should go there. Huh. Okay, cool. Where's your boat? Oh, I don't have a boat. Do you know how to swim? No. Mm-mm. Nope. Sink like a rock. Okay. Why the fuck are you talking about Saipan? Because like you actually don't. You are not presenting me with an option to get to Saipan. You're describing Saipan, but like that's it. That's where it stops.
Describing Saipan doesn't get us to Saipan.
No. Nor does living like we're on Saipan.
There is exactly took the words right out of my mouth, because those are the two things that libertarians do. They describe Saipan and they pretend that they live in Saipan.
Yes.
But they don't actually do anything to move us towards Saipan. And
I'm like I'm in Saipan. Hold on. Damn it, I'm not there.
For those who are just listening, Steven just showed a boob.
Yeah. Whoops.
So yeah, this it's like the system is going to collapse. It's coming down. If you can just have a little bit of patience and let it collapse, you don't need to be in the front row of people hacking at the foundation. Because the people who are in the front, I mean, unless your goal is just to be a martyr, but this isn't a time for martyrs. The time for martyrs is when the game is serious, not when the game is looking like it's going to be serious. Right now, being a martyr just turned like Ross Ulbricht is a martyr, and his life is freaking miserable. He doesn't like he's getting crushed, and it's entirely unjust. It's 100% unjust, but it's still happening. And if you want to line yourself up for that, more power to you. But you're not moving the ball forward. If anything, you are moving you're preventing the ball from being moved forward by putting yourself in a position to by allowing yourself to be maligned and everyone who is associated with you to be maligned with you. I'm just talking purely from a position of strategy. This is just strategically speaking. You're going to be much happier if you survive the collapse of the empire than if you're destroyed by the collapse of the empire. It's a very simple proposition here. So what I would recommend is put yourself in a position to survive the collapse of the empire, and don't put yourself in a position to be crushed by the collapse of the empire. But so if you're going to go out and you're going to get involved in a political game like this, if you're going to try to take over the LP and all this stuff, just realize that you are engaging in a risk-reward proposition that is bordering on insane. You're taking a pretty immense risk for basically no reward, because significant change is not going to happen through the LP. It's just not.
There was already a
Salon piece
where they attacked the Mises Caucus, I think. Now I think we may have talked about it for half a second, but yeah, there was a hit piece in Salon, and yeah, they used, I think they used the terms domestic terrorists, white supremacists, Nazis. Dave Smith is a Nazi sympathizer or something. That one's getting old, but I think that was in there too. But yeah, I mean, like if you start to even think about mattering, like that's not going to go anywhere. That's just going to get ratcheted up. But yeah, like there would have to be very focused action on, for example, like Pete Quinones wrote on his Substack, I think has like sort of this is how you would take over a small town. Like if you were going to try to be mayor of a small town, and you would have to make sure that the sheriff's department was set up like this, and the council was set up like this, and not like this. And he went through in detail, and that is something that's reasonable. But again, it's somewhat playing into the system. I don't know what the Mises Caucus is up to, but like if they have like a how-to guide, for people who are in a position where they're open to the idea of relocating and working together, then yeah, I guess that makes some sense. But in terms of just sort of unfocused action, you always just end up playing into the hand of the system, always. And that's, I think this kind of this idea of the sort of the generation that in all the generations that kind of got poisoned with this idea of, you can make a difference. For it affected everybody. For some people, they were told that they could make a difference, right? And so they became very susceptible to kind of being able to bridge the gap between the voice in their little chimp brain that tells them, I probably shouldn't be able to make a difference if I'm looking at myself honestly. That voice is in there somewhere, whether they think of it consciously or not, right? But people, gas me up for like decades in school, telling me that I'll be able to make a difference. So, what's this ridiculous policy that costs me nothing? This thing that I can yell at people, for not wearing masks and call them murderers. I can say that some business that makes the world go around need to basically close. To comply with like carbon regulations, and I can get it. It costs me nothing. I can save the world. Yeah, I matter. That's sort of on the same kind of spectrum of that like bioluminescent thing that we're talking about. Fulfilling that need to matter. But then with other people, who have weren't born into a position of power, have no kind of influence whatsoever, but just the idea that even I can ask myself, well, what can I do to fix this? It's like, you can't do shit. What are you talking about? The fuck are you talking about? Why are you asking yourself that question? Like, you know what I mean?
That's the latent Democrat in every American's mind. I was thinking about this. I'm re-listening to Moldbug's General Introduction right now, and one thing that has just really clicked and like re-resonated with me is the notion that anarchism, the ANCAP ideal, is exactly the same as the ultimate communist ideal, because it's power to the individual, that the entire playing field will be completely level and everyone will have equal amounts of power. That's the idea with it's latent in the Western limited government mentality, which is we need to, rather than having like government needs to be so limited that it's broken up into one piece that every single person can hold, and every person will have a micro fraction of the government. We'll all be equal. Nobody will have any rulers. That's like the same thing functionally as the communists' ideal. Their ideal is have no rulers, and everything devolves to rulers. And that's like the whole thing with that anarchists say, that ANCAPs say is well, there's always going to wind up being rulers. They just need to be private rulers, not public rulers. And market incentives and competition and blah 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 in an ideal situation, blah 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 blah. And this is why every single person who listens to an ANCAP describe what ANCAPistan would look like says, wouldn't warlords take over? And warlords already exist. Have already taken over. Okay, so what are you proposing? You're not proposing anything of significance. You're just saying that there should be different warlords. And sure, yeah, I agree there should be different warlords. I just acknowledge that there's going to be warlords and that there should be warlords and that everyone should be rallied behind their warlord of choice. Because that's the exact game that humans play. That's what politics is. That's just being honest about what it is, rather than trying to pretend that it's something different. So the notion that the secret to solving this political problem lies in using a political party to go convince people not to use political parties is one of the most inane things that I've ever heard. Now, what you said about local governments, there's an area where if you're thinking strategically, you might be able to make a difference. If you are very circumspect in your messaging and your presentation of yourself, and you have a long-term plan rather than just take over the party. If you have an actual laid out strategy, you can take over a local school board. You can get a hold of a sheriff's office. You can take over a local city assembly. You can take over some of these smaller organizations, and you can make a difference in people's lives while also not keeping yourselves directly in the crosshairs of the corporate press. It's going to happen eventually at some point. They're going to start going after and picking off people like this. So anyone who makes a headline makes it a lot easier for them because it draws the searchlight. If you make headlines, you draw the searchlight onto yourself. And you can capitalize on that. You can say, hey, you know, any publicity is good publicity. And so you can draw the headlines to yourself, but be wise about how you do it and have a plan and have fuck you money. That's basically the secret. You have to have fuck you money.
It just plays into the nature of how human beings organize themselves. You know, there are people who are sort of born leaders, and most people are inclined to follow. And people have been sort of conditioned in the country where they associate the word power with negative and ruling over people. And you know, I think so there's a lot of people who are inclined to just say, oh, well, I'd like to be left alone. It's kind of a cop out, because what you're doing is if you feel that you don't need a ruler in some capacity, you should be taking that responsibility. You should be taking some form of responsibility. And if this past year hasn't been like a PhD level course in a lot of people are just looking to follow, you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you couldn't see that, but you know, if you are one of these people who, you know, feels that they don't need a leader, well, maybe you are one, and you know, maybe you're not going to lead the country, but you can lead some small part of your community, and you should be taking that responsibility. And just the idea of, well, I'm not going to have anything to do with this disgusting system. It's just, I'm, you know, yeah, everyone's their own king. Okay. It's just a childish sort of outlook, but that's okay. You know, because some people are childish, and then hopefully with time they become less childish with new information.
Yeah. Yeah, eventually. That's a good way of framing the kind of our goal with this is, I guess you might say, to help ANCAPs be less childish in their view of the world. I think that's basically how Moldbug, because I mean, there's libertarians that are like the actual LP libertarians. Whenever I'm talking about libertarians, I'm not talking about them, just so people understand. I'm talking about the basically right-wing libertarians are the ones that I'm primarily trying to talk to, because they're the ones who are, I don't know, I don't see them as a hopeless case. They've just fallen in love with a utopia and stopped reading. And you have to keep reading. And I want to get the right-wing libertarians who still have some hope, I want to get them reading stuff that will inform them in how to actually make a difference, what you need to do to actually make a difference. Anyway, so we can get into more of this as we go through here today. There's some comments here, but I'm going to reply to them. I'll talk to him again here at the end because I want to make sure we get through these comments that Model Mark made on one of our videos. So he was talking about it was almost 2 months ago, I think. It was the Game Stonks video. So if you want to go rewatch that video and so you can remember. I don't actually remember exactly what we were talking about. I'm just going to be replying to what he said. But the name of the episode was Game Stonks plus what libertarians can learn from AOC. That's the episode that he was commenting on. So we're going to reply to them. Let me get them back open here. See what he was saying. Okay, there we go. So the first thing that I wanted to respond to is he said this was something that I was kind of waiting for somebody to say as we've been talking about Dave Smith and beating up on Dave Smith, which we haven't done as much of lately. He said Dave Smith argued recently that Ron Paul was principled and reached a lot of people and posed a threat, so was politically cut off. His son Rand Paul played the power game, dumped his principles, and ended somewhere at the bottom. Rand Paul even said in a speech about his father, "You know how long it took my father to dump Reagan? His first budget." Rand Paul himself, on the other hand, kept supporting Trump through his disastrous budgets. People do operate in principles because principles define nature. Okay. So this was one of the things that when I first was listening to Dave talking about this whole take over the Mises Caucus and take over the LP thing, one of the first things that he said that just really made my head hurt, when he said that basically Ron Paul is our model, that Ron Paul needs to be the person we model our political strategy after. And also when he said, and also when he said that the thing he said about Rand Paul, that Rand Paul was an example of someone who tried to be Machiavellian. And now, okay, yeah, I would, you could say that Rand Paul tried to be Machiavellian, but I'm also, when I say that libertarians should be Machiavellian, I'm not saying libertarians should be bad at being Machiavellian. I'm saying libertarians should be good at it. So saying, well, this guy did it and he was bad at it. Okay, yeah, so don't be bad at it. I don't, like, then this high idea that, oh, we need to model ourselves after Ron Paul because look at the success that this is, if this is the level of political analysis you bring to the table, you should not be talking about trying to take over a party, because this is the most like shallow analysis. Like it's basically just thing A happened and then thing B happened, therefore thing A caused thing B. It did, like, it's basic correlation and causation fallacy.
Yeah.
Ron Paul was not successful because of the things that he was talking about. Ron Paul was successful because he was a middle finger to the establishment, and the people wanted a middle finger to the establishment. Donald Trump was a more successful middle finger was a better middle finger to the establishment, and that's why Donald Trump got elected. Ron Paul didn't get elected. So the idea, oh, he was a threat politically, and that's why he got cut off. So what about Donald Trump? Donald Trump was a threat politically, and he won. So what we're saying is that we need to model our strategy after the guy who got taken out, and not after the guy who actually won the presidency. How does this pass for coherent political analysis to you? Ron Paul was successful because he was the only middle finger available. It had nothing to do with him being anti-Fed. It had nothing to do with him wanting to legalize heroin. Each of these things kind of played a role. It played a part, but it wasn't the substance of his messaging. It was the fact that his messaging existed. You couldn't go run the exact same campaign that Ron Paul did now and have the same success, because his all of the political energy around him was absorbed by Trump and carried through by Trump. It's actual explicit or Bernie. Yeah, Bernie would. Yeah. A lot of people would have gone to Bernie as well, because what would have appealed to them about Ron Paul would have been him speaking out against the banks and the corporations, and they would have just kind of heard that vaguely and said, "Oh yeah, Bernie," like this. So then when you say, "Oh, well, what we need to do is we need to say in the Fed," and that's what's going to get people's attention. The people who that appealed to translated that to vote for Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. So that's a possible outcome of taking that approach. This is the level of sophistication that you're dealing with in the people that you're talking to. When you're coming at them with these complicated economic arguments and just calling everyone around you war criminals and stuff, like that appeals to people to some extent, but they're not going to rally around behind that. You have to package other things with it. You have to bring a positive vision. You have to say, this is what we are going to do, and this is how it's going to immediately personally benefit your life. And it can't be in a you get to take more responsibility for your life message, because that's dead on arrival. It just is not. The avenue for that message is something other than politics. So this idea that Ron Paul was principled and he was more successful than Rand Paul, who wasn't, therefore Ron Paul's method is better and principles matter. Like none of those, that's just a bunch of non sequiturs. None of those things actually go together and fit together in a message like was trying to be presented here. So that question, I'm going to ask this question here in a little bit because that's going to be that's a really good one. I like that one. But let me find another one here. So he said libertarianism has something to offer: better healthcare, more security, no wars, less poverty, more wealth, more opportunity. I don't understand this. They have nothing to offer stuff. Libertarians aren't offering that. That's exactly our point. You need to actually offer that, not just say it's theoretically possible. You need to actually offer these things, not give hypothetical arguments for how they could be created. Create them. And then say, look at this thing that I've created. Do this instead. That's exactly our point. Libertarians aren't offering that. They're just talking about it. The next question he had here is, he said, anarcho-capitalism works means it is a consistent set of principles and thus the only system that could be really implemented. Humans have to be obedient is not consistent and as such cannot be implemented because the ruler cannot be obedient. None of the other systems have morality that is consistent for all members, but anarcho-capitalism is not a strategy. As far as I know, it does not pretend to be. Yeah, it doesn't pretend to be, but people who consider themselves anarcho-capitalists think that they're participating in a strategy. It's not a strategy, but they think it is. They're masquerading as being strategic when they're not. But none of the other systems have morality that is consistent for all members. No system has morality that is consistent for all members. No. That's the point. If you're going to have a law, whoever enforces the law, by definition, must be exempt from the law. Because you can't enforce the law on yourself. That whatever governs cannot be limited, because whatever limits it is the government.
That's the government.
Right. Limited government is an oxymoron. It can't exist. It fundamentally cannot exist. There will always be someone who is exempt from the law. When you try to practice anarcho-capitalism, what you're saying is we're going to have a system that is ostensibly where everyone is bound by the law, but no one is and everyone is enforcing it at the same time, or something like that. And it's what you wind up with is people taking power without taking responsibility for the power that they've had, which is exactly the situation that we're in now. This is why ultimately this is the king pill. This is the argument for monarchy, that the person who has power must also be the person who is accountable. And when you divide power, you divide accountability. And you've created an insanity. You've created something that just doesn't work and can't ever work. Power by
very dangerous shell game.
Yes. Yeah. Authority, like dividing authority means you're getting less authority, which is a very bad thing if you want to have a law that is enforced. Divided authority is another name for corruption. That's how you get corruption, is by dividing authority up among people, because then everything gets passed around. What we have right now is a system where one person making a decision is seen as bad and corrupt. We're latent in our brains is this idea that as many people need to be involved in the decision as possible in order to make it a good decision. Really what we would need is every single person, ideally, to all be participating in the decision. That's when we've completely flattened the playing field and gotten rid of the state, and we don't have any rulers anymore. That's when everyone is all equally capable of making the decisions, and no one single person is responsible for them. That is communism. That is the definition of communism. That's why communism is such a cluster. Because when nobody is responsible, when nobody's forced to be responsible, then nobody will be, and no one is responsible for anything, and everything goes to shit. That is the outcome of trying to divide accountability and divide power among people. This is the nature of power. I'm not saying that this is how it should be. I'm saying this is how it is. It's unavoidable. You can't get around it. That's how every human system works. As you divide authority up, you get less and less accountability, less and less responsibility, and the whole system deranges into chaos and anarchy.
Which is not a good thing.
Which is not a good thing.
Despite how cool libertarians want to sound by calling themselves anarchists. That's as it is understood by most people. That's the polar opposite of what you're after.
Right. And they like say, oh well, no, I'm trying to redefine the term. No, you're not. You don't get to redefine the term. You don't have the tanks. If you have the tanks, you can redefine the term. Until then, you can't. So you need to be focused on getting tanks, not on trying to convince people that anarchy actually isn't bad.
And helicopters.
So here I think he's quoting me. I don't know if I don't remember. I didn't go back through and listen to this, and I'm not going to. He said, quote, there is such a thing as competent government. And I don't remember the context in which I said that, but I do believe that to be the case. He says, now I'm beginning to think you do not understand libertarianism. Haven't read Rothbard or Mises. Really? Like this is... Oh, you got me. Apparently the problem here is that I just don't know enough. Just if everybody knew what I knew, they would be a libertarian. I just have to make sure everybody knows what I know. There's a reason people don't want to be libertarians, because libertarians come off as major jerk-offs. He said, you have a number of values. You voluntarily act to have your most desirable value realized. Government means someone forces you to choose a value lower on your value scale. How can any type of governing make you better off? How can a competent government force you to realize a value highest on your value list that you didn't already want to realize without a gun to your head? You don't know what you want, what value you want to have until you look at the people around you. You don't derive it from the ether. You don't bring it up out of yourself. Apparently, you haven't read Rene Girard. Oops. Value is not something that's derived from someone. The decisions that people make, the values that they decide to pursue are defined by the people around them. Humans are mimetic creatures who derive these values as a collective, and they pursue them as a collective. This is just how humans operate. If you evaluate a human like an ant or a bee, you'll see that they act as collectives. They don't act as an individual atomized unit. No person does. Every person makes decisions emotionally and justifies them rationally, retroactively. And the rationale that they use to justify that emotion may be something that they've derived themselves uniquely, though there's nothing new under the sun. So at some point, someone else had derived it. But the emotions that you use to make that decision were informed by your surroundings. They were inculcated into you by the environment that you grew up in. So you didn't just rationally reason yourself to the highest value that you've chosen to follow. It's a product of the community that you're in. It's the product of the people who are around you. There is always going to be a governing force that forces you to choose a value lower on your value scale at some point. Whether that governing force is nature, or whether that governing force is a robber in your house, or whether that governing force is a state that exists around you, or an HOA, or whatever other community that you're participating in, there's always going to be some sort of a force that forces you to choose a value that you otherwise wouldn't have. And in order to have a coherent community, everyone must share a common value system that they otherwise may not have had as their highest value, but most likely they will commune themselves around a highest value. This is the necessity of religion. If you want to have the most peaceful, cooperative, coherent society you can, let me mute Stephen real quick. Give me a thumbs up when you're ready, when you're good. If you want to have the most coherent, peaceful society you can, you want to be surrounded by a bunch of people who all believe the same way. That's what people need. That's what libertarians need to be in the business of now, is creating communities of people who all feel the same way. Because then it's much easier to decide what sort of governing system you want. I don't care which one you choose. I know which one I'm going to associate myself with and which one I'm going to be in the business of trying to create. And I'm going to try to make the case for other people to share it, to want it as well. But this notion of, well, the government means someone forces you to choose a value lower than on your value scale. You can't force me to choose something I don't want to choose. I can do what I want. This is why anarchism really is juvenile. It's a juvenile expression of rebellion. That whether you might not be juvenile yourself, but you're expressing a juvenile sentiment that needs to run into the real world. It needs to have an encounter with the real world. Once you have an encounter with the real world, you might realize, hey, it would be ideal. In an ideal circumstance, I would never ever have to choose something that I don't want to do. I would only ever be able to just choose everything I wanted. That would be a great world. Doesn't everyone want to live in that world with me? Yeah, of course. Everyone wants to live in a world where they only ever have to choose their own highest values. But what happens when your highest value conflicts with someone else's highest value? Then what? Now you have to decide whose highest value gets to be higher. And how does that happen? That's accomplished by force. It's whoever has the power to enforce his highest value. That's just the nature of how it is. You can argue against that. You can say, no, that's wrong. You can't do that. You can't force me to give up the stuff in my house to you just because you're pointing a gun at me. I have rights. How dare you? Whoever has the gun's gonna win. Doesn't matter what's right, just matters what is. So, it's better for one person to control the guns for everyone. And then the problem of how do I make sure this person doesn't have an effect on me that I don't want is an engineering problem. It's not a moral problem. Morality only plays a role post hoc. It doesn't play a role in the actual implementation of it. All it is an engineering problem. And that engineering that's a groundworking that has to be laid, that hasn't been laid. That's what, Stephen, when he described the boat, the boat to Saipan, that's the boat to Saipan, is the engineering for how to make the ideal system possible. Right now, that engineering doesn't exist. There is nothing. Right now, libertarians are playing a convince everyone to be libertarians game. They're just playing by the rules of democracy. That's what every other democratic organization thinks they're in the business of doing, is convincing other people to play by their rules. The people who profess to love democracy the most have realized that that's a failure of a game, no one will ever win that game. The people who win are the ones who give up convincing and just start shooting. Those are the ones who wind up winning. So they're taking steps toward that. Like we showed you the graph at the beginning of the show. They're moving toward that. And if you think that the solution here is just going to be to try to convince them even harder, then you're going to be the first one shot. You need to be in the business of building a bigger gun. Let me see. What was the other comment that I was going to read? So one of them he had here was actually, this was kind of an interesting theoretical conversation here. He said, do you think the nature of power/obedience arises from the slaves being slaves and the rulers are just a consequence, like flies coming to a wound? Or that the ruler makes the slaves? In other words, do the slaves cause the ruler or the ruler cause the slaves? That's actually a really interesting question. That's an interesting thing to ponder. And I think that the slaves come first because the majority of humans have a slave mentality. The majority of humans want to surrender their own sovereignty to someone in return for protection. So the slaves, by slaves, I mean the people who have a slave mentality, the people who have the idea that they need a big government to come protect them, the people who say, the mask wearers, people who are ready to surrender their own safety at the first sign of, or to surrender their own freedom in return for safety at the first sign of a threat, those people are slaves. We just pretend that they're not, but they're effectively slaves. They have a relationship to people as if they're slaves. They just wait to be told what to do, and then they go do it, and then they come back for pats on the head like a good boy. Those people exist. And those people will surrender, will enslave themselves. Jason likes to say that everyone walks. Jason Stapleton, the host of Wealth, Power, and Influence, the other show that I'm on, he likes to say that everyone's walking around with their umbilical cord hanging out, looking for someone to plug it into. Those are the slaves. Yep. The slaves already exist. They're looking for someone to plug it into, and they're going to plug it into someone. So if you think that you're going to create a scenario where there is no one to be, this is the big distinction here. The libertarian, anarchist, whatever paradise, the Ancapistan paradise, is nobody is able to plug their umbilical cord into anyone. That's what you're trying to create. You're trying to create a scenario where, like, if everyone's umbilical cord that they're walking around with is a male end and they're looking for a female end to plug it into, you're saying that the libertarian ideal world is a world with no with no female ends. So it's
it was a really great run that we had, and we just want to thank everybody for watching. It looks like we made it to about 250 subscribers. I don't know if did we hit 250,000? No, 229. It takes a while to update, so we might be flirting with that. But yeah, 25%. That's how far we got. I thought we might have made it halfway, but it doesn't look like it's on the menu. Again, I'm Stephen Messina at Messina Inc. I think on Twitter. That's Matthew Erickson, the other host of King Pilled. You can follow him at Real King Pilled. All right, that went on longer than.
I think I just provided a scientific proof for why libertarians are misogynists.
That's right.
So that's that
that's
analogy.
What Solana's going to say anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm teeing it up for him. But that analogy just kind of came to me as I was talking. But basically, that's what libertarians are. They're kind of trying to decide or describe that engineering circumstance where everyone who wants to go plug their umbilical cord into someone doesn't have anyone to plug it into, so they're forced to just like plug it back into themselves or something. That's what you're trying to describe, and that's very noble. But that is it's not realistic. It can't ever happen because the vast majority of people are always going to look for someone to plug their umbilical cord into. And if you don't give them one, they'll create their own. They'll mold together some fake female end and jam it in there. But what will happen is that someone else
microwave it first.
What will happen is that someone will eventually position themselves as the almighty female end for them to plug their umbilical cords into. And
this motherfucker's just on a roll.
If you want to see a libertarian world, you must be the one to create the female end for the umbilical cords of everyone else.
There. So all right. So let's devil's advocate this thing out a little bit. If you had like a tiny area in relatively small population, I don't know what the number would be. I can't quite get my head around it. But like everybody agreed on the idea. This is about to get like quasi theoretical here. Everybody kind of was playing by the Ancapistan rules, and was like drinking that Kool-Aid. What kind of size community do you think you could make work if you had to?
Could you rephrase the question?
Yeah, I guess like let's say some like corner of Montana somewhere, you carved out a certain amount of land, or even maybe if it was I don't know if it has to be geographical, but I'm just trying to think of just like a system where everyone was agreeing to play by those rules, or little communities where everyone was agreeing to play with those rules and interact with one another. It could not, I'm taking like for granted, it could not, mini Ancapistan could not include just a random selection of United States citizens.
Right.
Like that's straight out the window.
Right. It has to be a select selection.
Right. President Ron Paul tomorrow and whatever and ANCAP rule. It would be over in a week and a half.
Yep.
Like not even. But if you did get the people who were all advocating for this, and like I don't know, I might even be like a part of it. I don't know. It sounds. I mean, I'm fine with the rules of ANCAPistan for sure. I'm just wondering what kind of size are we talking about? We're talking about like it would have to just be maximum capacity is the sum total of everyone who openly advocates for ANCAPistan. And then if you start to have people who either fall off from that, begin to think differently or whatever, they would have to be gone. That's where the helicopters would have to come in, because it would be such a fragile system that the entropy is just looming, just waiting for it to fall apart.
And the more
I'm trying to think of a way. Yeah.
The more people that you entrusted the power of that to, the more people that you entrusted the power of that to, the more. So say you get a group of, it's 200 people who are all they're all just full-blown committed ANCAPs, and they're willing to do whatever is necessary. They're super conscious, and they're willing to do whatever's necessary to make this system work no matter what. So you don't have to deal with all the problems of like building the engineering the technology that's necessary to try to take trust out of the situation and as much as possible, or whatever else. So you say you have 200 people, and you say we're going to divide up power among 5 guys. This is going to be our council of 5 who decide all the rules and everything, and periodically we're going to elect them. What you've done is you've opened up you have 5 times the surface area for corruption and violence and violation of the ideals that everyone wants to subscribe to than if you had just entrusted one guy with that power. If you entrust one guy with that power, that's on a small scale, yeah.
Yeah.
But so as when each time that you expand what that is sovereignty. The person who is responsible for enforcing the law is the sovereign. Each time you divide that sovereignty up, you decrease the likelihood that that accountability will happen. You decrease the likelihood that person will remain responsible to their ostensible purpose. That's so, obviously at a small scale, it's probably easier to imagine a single person. Like it's kind of like, if you have a company of, 25 people or whatever, it's easy to imagine a CEO, and he's the responsible one, and whatever. He doesn't rule the world. He just kind of rules this small area. So if he gets too carried away and he has to be removed by force or whatever else, it's not going to be too catastrophic. That works for people. But as the group of people gets larger and larger, and that person's power expands more and more and more, they become a greater and greater threat to people. And the consequences of their actions gain more and more import. And it's like people just reach this tipping point where they're just like, nope, not that one person. Nope, not one person, not at this size anymore, not in this circumstance. But even there's lots of very large corporations with hundreds of thousands of people involved who have a single CEO. And people don't have a problem with that. That doesn't really change obviously some people have a problem with CEOs, but the majority of people, they're like, yeah, got to have a CEO, got to run the place. If you introduce the idea of running a company like a democracy, people would be like, you are out of your mind. There's no way you're ever going to get anything done. And it's going to be nothing but bickering and squabbling all day. Yet somehow when you get to government, suddenly people are like, oh, no, you got to divide it up among as many people as possible. So the desire to limit the government makes the government much larger. So if your goal is to have small government, you want the government to be as unlimited as possible, because the more unlimited it is, the smaller it will be. So when libertarians talk about believing in small government, what their own words are saying it. You're saying you believe in a monarchy. You want small government. A monarchy is a small government. You look like you want to say something.
Nope.
You good? Okay.
I'm just looking at you. You look great. I love listening to your thoughts.
Natural curls.
It looks so good today.
So when I was on the episode with Buck, he said I was kind of trying to search for. I've been trying to search for a definition of a democracy, of an actual democracy in practice that works. And I couldn't come up with like a pithy enough way to say it. It was kind of like, it's like a government that, it's not mob rule. Like that's what people always like. They love to say, "Oh, it's a republic because a democracy is mob rule," and yada, 51% bossing, 49%, etc. That's the same. It's the libertarian 101 argument that everyone masters, and they think they've solved the secrets of the universe. In practice, when someone who advocates for democracy describes democracy, if you listen to their words, they're not saying 51% boss the 49%. They're saying a government that takes into consideration the will of the people, or a government that's directed by the will of the people. You say, if you dig into that, you're getting away from what they're actually trying to say. They're not taking the conversation as far as mob rule, in large part because they explicitly believe in mob rule. They explicitly believe in using a mob of people to bully everyone else into doing what they want. So when you say, "Oh, you're describing mob rule," they're like, "What?" Like you're describing mob rule to them is kind of like trying to describe water to a fish. It's like, well, I just exist in a world where mob rule is the default. So if you have to try to describe it to me, you're just a weirdo. I'm not going to listen to you. So, but of course, as usual, Moldbug is just the master of defining things very incisively. And so as I'm listening to the general intro again, he said, he's got the best definition of democracy right here. A democracy is a government in which public policy is controlled by public opinion. Boom. That's the word I was looking for. Public policy is controlled by public opinion. There's nothing about mob rule inherent in that. It's just public opinion. Whatever public opinion is. He says, fine, wonderful. We knew that. But who controls public opinion? And there you go. Whoever controls public opinion will control the government. That's the secret of democracy. The democracy is fundamentally actually an oligarchy. It's like every democracy becomes an oligarchy and rules as an oligarchy. So really, there is no such. They say there's three types of government. There's democracy. There's monarchy, oligarchy, and democracy, and the three cycle among each other. But there's actually only two. There's just monarchy and oligarchy, and we just ping pong back and forth between the two. But when the oligarchy takes power from the monarch, they do it by appealing to democracy and pretending to be in a democracy. Populism is the means for revolution, but it's just ping-ponging back and forth between oligarchy and monarchy. So really, if we were smart, we would stop engaging with the idea of democracy altogether, and we would say that the only two options are oligarchy and monarchy, and we advocate monarchy. Like that's how simple you can put it. But right. To continue with the rest of his sentence here, he said, duh, popular opinion is in general a reflection of public education. So who controls popular opinion or public opinion? Duh, popular opinion is in general a reflection of public education. It is certainly true that there are certain statements that the public cannot be educated to believe. It may be impossible to convince a healthy human population, for example, that red and blue are the same color. But almost everything short of this has been tried, and it tends to work. So while there are always deviants, outliers in an election are irrelevant by definition. Outliers in an election are irrelevant by definition. So, who educates the public? Our answer is simple. The Jews. Sorry, Jew haters, just kidding. I just had to get that in there because
that's the name of the next episode.
Sorry, Jew haters, just kidding. I just gotta. As we're ramping up our follower number here, we gotta push the envelope a little more to make sure this is a fair fight. So I just had to read that.
Yeah,
but that's
interesting.
That's the basis of the that's the basis of the problem facing liberty lovers. Is public opinion is going to be in our system of government right now. Public opinion is going to be dictated by the education system. And if libertarians still have this baked in idea that the goal here is going to be to convince enough people to buy in, and somehow we need to convince X tens or hundreds of millions of people to buy into our ideas, then magically the world will change. Like that seems to be the project that most libertarians are dedicating themselves to. In reality, you just need to surround yourself with as many people who see the world as you do as you can, and then start carving off a space for yourselves. Get yourself embedded somewhere where you can hunker down and try to ride out the storm as best as possible. And then in the
Like
meantime, yeah. And then in the meantime, stacking assets, cash, whatever you need to get through. And ultimately, whoever governs society after the fact, there you go. Whoever governs society after the fact will be the person who set themselves to maximizing their own wealth, power, and influence. Shout out to the other show. And in the next several years, I don't know if it's going to be, maybe the empire collapses in 5 years, maybe it collapses in 25, maybe it collapses in 105. I don't know. I know that in early 1980s Soviet Russia, nobody thought that the collapse was imminent. And then suddenly the collapse was behind them. So, who knows how long this is going to take. But if you want to be able to influence the world with your message, it starts with increasing your influence. And so you need that's the engineering problem that's facing libertarians. I think that's about all I've got today. Popular Liberty here in the live chat on YouTube has really been putting some good thoughts.
Great thoughts.
Maybe I'll just for the sake of the audio listeners later, I'll just read through what he's been saying. So he said, in response to the question about slaves, which comes first, slaves or rulers, he said the former, slaves come first. It's Soros's law of reflexivity. Got to get another buzzword in there. Soros. You create what you fear. They fear tyranny, so they create an institution to protect them from tyranny. Then they put Gavin Newsom at the top of that institution. Then he said, Messina, power is force divided by distance. So it depends on the amount of force per distance that would make a state unsustainable where the people simply couldn't afford it. States are higher up on Maslow's hierarchy. People have to be able to afford it. And Kapistan is a nation that is too small to be able to afford a state. That's a really, really good point. And Kapistan is a nation that would be too small to be able to afford a state. Democracy is destruction. Destruction creates chaos. Chaos makes states grow. The left actively foments chaos, actively creates chaos, and they're funded by the state to do so because the state thrives on chaos. Chaos is what creates the justification for the state to come in there. This is what I said in the last episode, that organized crime and the state will always ultimately become the same thing because they both need each other. Organized crime needs the state. The state needs organized crime needs the state to keep them in business. If your job is prostitution, you need prostitution to stay illegal. If your job is drug trafficking, you need drugs to stay illegal. So they need the state there to make these things illegal to create their black markets. At the same time, the state needs the organized crime so that they have a reason to stay in business and to keep doing things and to keep absorbing power to themselves. So the factors in society, the social groups that promote chaos, that the Black Lives Matter and Antifa and all these different organizations, they are not only allowed to exist, but they are kept alive. Their flames are fanned because they create chaos, which creates a pretext for the state. He said that's why Moldbug pushes corporate monarchy. It's the best of both worlds. And then let's see here. He says monarchy creates, democracy destroys. Both are important to the cycle of progress. Democracy is how we get rid of bad monarchs and replace them with better monarchs. Democracy is a means, but the people expressing their will, mobilizing in force and expressing their will, is a way of keeping monarchy accountable. But the people have to believe that the problem was with the monarch and not with the monarchy. And because again, democracy is governed by public opinion. Whoever governs public opinion will determine what people believe. So it's necessary. One thing that Moldbug said is that in an absolute state or a totalitarian state, that the state has no need for propaganda. They don't really care what people believe because people don't have the power to do anything. I think that's not entirely true. I get what he's saying, and I think it's a good observation that people people feel like a totalitarian dictator would be the most oppressive person to live under because he would just, but he's not going to be engaged in propaganda necessarily because he's like, I don't care what you guys think. I'm the one with all the power. The fact that he could potentially be overthrown means that if you all in this given area believed in a specific set of values, and part of those values was we have a monarch who governs, there has to be propaganda for why that monarch is the best option. And some of that can be just latent in cultural wisdom that's passed on because of stuff that's happened in the past. And then with the internet existing now and being able to institutionalize information, I can see 100, 200 years from now, looking back at this at a universal suffrage state being kind of the way that we look back at slavery or something like that, where it's just like, that was something that people used to believe in for whatever reason, and it was clearly insane, and now we don't. You can get that sort of thing kind of embedded in the culture at large, where everyone believes in it, and so because of that, they believe in supporting the monarchy, and if there's a corrupt monarch, then you just get rid of him and put someone new in. But again, now you're dealing with an engineering problem. You're not dealing with a moral problem. You're just dealing with how do we substitute out a bad monarch and replace him with a good one and maintain as much stability within the system as possible. And it's engineering. You just need the right set of technology to do it. But that, I think, is the state's best propaganda is what they don't tell people at all. The point of the education system is to keep people uneducated. Yes, that's a very good point. The point of our existing, that's a whopper of a tweet right there. The point of our existing education system is to keep people uneducated, to keep them thinking, coloring between the lines and bowling between the lanes. It's trying to keep. They don't want people straying outside the prescribed 3x5 card.
New podcast name, Gutter Balls, with Stevie Boy and Maddie.
Gutter Balls.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Basically, it's always going to be a ruling class of people who run all the shit, and then all these idiots, that are running around thinking that they should be important. There's a whole system that allows them to do things that cost them nothing, yet feel incredibly important and think that they have power, but they're just giving the power upwards to the people who really truly do run shit.
Right.
Which is why it's infuriating when you watch libertarians like defend all this stuff, all the stuff that they're doing, making fun of people for crying about statues coming down when it has nothing to do with the statue, has nothing to do with the history. It just has to do with the fact that they're flexing on their enemies, and
right.
That's it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. They are the people who have the most contempt for your values are flexing on the people they see as their enemies. So you may not see yourself, you may not identify with their enemies, but they sure identify you with their enemies. And they're the ones who have the power and the motivation to do something. So yeah, The last thing I'll say here is that tweet from the Libertarian Party of Texas about immigration as a human right. This is just. Did you not see that one?
What? No.
Oh yeah, the Libertarian Party of Texas tweeted immigration is a human right.
Oh, for fuck's sake, man.
And it just, I did whatever I could to just not engage with it, but it just, first of all, no, it's not. It's like you cannot reconcile immigration as a human right with property rights. Just if you're going to deal with autistic libertarian canon, you can't reconcile those things. You can't have immigration as a human right and also property rights. Those two don't go together. But it also belies, I'm so shocked that a Libertarian Party organization has no grasp of the actual facts of what's happening on the ground here. But the whole point of the immigration situation, the immigration industry in America is, this is going to sound very Marxist, it's funny, but the point of the immigration system in America is capital transfers from labor to capital. It's wealth transfers from labor to capital. What was that?
Oh, my hustling, bustling downtown right here.
Oh, that sounded cool.
The Libertarian Party of Texas tried to immigrate to North Sentinel Island. See how it goes.
That's something. If you want to hear more about that, about the immigration thing, go listen to Eric Weinstein, which is interesting. Super progressive guy, but he is a very much an immigration restrictionist, and it's because he's seen firsthand how the mechanism is very simple. The major corporations, major moneyed interests are incentivized to import cheap labor because it undercuts American labor. They can pay immigrants less than they pay Americans, and they can pocket the difference. So it's a way of creating a disenfranchised underclass and maximizing wealth inequality in a bad way. There's wealth inequality is inevitable, but that doesn't mean that every form of wealth inequality is good. And
Right.
what you want, if you want a stable society, which means if you want property rights respected, you want to have a stable society, and you do not want to have a disenfranchised, angry underclass that is just feels like they have nothing to lose, because that's when violence begins. And that's the point of the existing immigration system, is to create a disenfranchised, angry underclass.
And so you're better off just shutting up and paying a little bit more for whatever goods that get created in your society, because inevitably, exactly what you just described will happen if because it's kind of weird. It's actually it's sort of like a touchy-feely, kind of like a lefty little thing. You know what I mean? When you come down to it, you have to think. You can't just think about the money man. It's not all about dollars and cents.
That disenfranchised underclass, when they get upset, they're sure not going to be voting libertarian. So
no bueno.
So you're like, this is the same as the whole, like, we need to jump on board with Black Lives Matter, and that will convince liberals to suddenly be libertarian. Like, it's the same concept. Like, we're gonna cape for these people, thinking that, oh, they're gonna come join us, and they're gonna be like, get away from me, weirdo, leave me alone.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
As they should.
Yep. As they absolutely should. Anyways, this has been a fun show. It was fun to talk about some of these nerdy things. That's, I guess, kind of the gist of our show, is talking about nerdy things. But thank you for joining us, folks. Shout out to Emma in the comments. She's from the UK. We have an international audience, apparently.
Yeah, I saw that there might be a woman in there. That's kind of strange. Yeah, if they're not related to us.
Yeah, I figured that the only woman we'd have in here would be his mom and my wife.
Your wife. Yeah.
Yeah. She says, am I your first subscriber who actually lives under a monarchy? That's a good point. She probably is.
Shit.
That's great. All right. Well, this has been another episode of King Pilled. I am your host, Matt Erickson. You can follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled. That is the man over there getting nude, is the other host. That was slick. He managed to pull his shirt off.
I'm just going to do a thing where I start getting naked as the show starts to end.
He realized that there's another girl here other than my wife and his mom, so he has to start getting naked. So do us a favor, like this show, and then share it and subscribe. And Steve does not live under Gavin Newsom. Matt lives under Gavin Newsom. Steve lives under some other joker.
Some other commie.
Yeah.
Roy Cooper.
Roy Cooper. Okay, there you go. All right. So yeah, please like and share the show, and subscribe wherever you're listening. Pretty soon we'll have it out on iTunes. I'm just going to keep saying that, and one day it'll magically happen. And anyways.
Just like in Kapistan.
Exactly.
If we live like our podcast. In fact, check this out. Ready? Go find King Pilled on iTunes and listen to the episodes at work. They're going to be there.
Yeah,
because
be there.
With full confidence, we are behaving like our podcast. Yeah, yeah. And be sure to stick around for the extra 30 minutes in the post show for paying subscribers only.
Yes, where Steven will get completely naked. Our viewership has shot up in the last couple of minutes since you started getting naked. So maybe we need to
completely naked. Actually,
maybe we need to go down this.
To be very honest with you, I did this whole thing with no pants on.
Woo! Great.
Yep.
Hey, Magoo, we talked about you at the very beginning. I don't know if you were here the whole time, but you got a shout out at the start. So once I end this stream here, you should go back and listen, see what we had to say. Anyways, talk to you later, folks. We'll be back live on Monday at 12:30 Pacific. Deuces.